Hello everybody, this is Gregory with Permanent Weight Loss Made Easy, where there should be no hesitance in your weight loss and in your weight maintenance. Today we're going to talk about unpeeling the layers of trauma that have led you to be fat. But before we begin, if you need help with weight loss, contact me through the Clarity FM link found here in the episode notes. I lost over 100 pounds and I kept it off for 30 plus years. If you need help, I can help you. Also, post a comment. I'd love to hear from you. So one of the central theses of this channel, it's been around, maybe 2 years, is trauma. Trauma is what causes us to have a disordered relationship with food, with drink, with drugs. We're trying to numb a pain that we either inherited or that happened to us typically at a younger age. And I've mentioned many times, you look at a dog, you look at all the animals in nature, right? You don't find typically fat birds, fat squirrels. If you look at a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, they're just going to eat till they're hungry, until they're no longer hungry, and then they walk away. But if we're honest, if we're intellectually honest, obese people, they turn to food to soothe the pain. I did it. I had a rageaholic father and a kind of depressed, aloof mother. I wasn't getting nurturance at a young age. I turned to food. So when you look at the trauma in our life, much of it comes from other sources, in addition to maybe the trauma that you experienced at a young age. And we'll talk about these things. But one of the big things that really probably isn't talked about too much is intergenerational trauma. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you think about, in some ways, we live in an easier time, especially when it comes to parenting, but you think like 100 years ago, 150 years ago, let's just look at your great-grandparents or your grandparents. They were probably, the crap would beat out of them all the time. You think about the 1910s, 1930s, this was quite normal. That was the type of parenting. There was no like, let's put Tommy in a timeout. Let's take away his iPad. Let's get on our knees and get eye level with him. And like, what was your thought process for doing that? You didn't do that. You're like seen and not heard. Get the F out of here. So you think about it, there was, and not in all families. I don't want to say that, not in all families, but I think it was much more normalized and much more okay of abuse, especially physical abuse. Sexual abuse, no doubt. You look at 1920s, 1930s. I mean, there wasn't even like law enforcement out there to really even deal with this. Nobody talked about these things. And so you think of the trauma like your grandfather inherited. And back then, let's say in the 1950s, it's not like they talk this stuff out. Think of all the GIs. Think of all the guys who go to, ladies, who go to military and come back with shell shock, as they used to call World War I, PTSD. It's not like they're coming back and going to therapy in 1949. No, they're beating up their kids. So your grandparents had trauma, whether it be physical trauma, sexual trauma, negligence, whatever it is. And so they had kids and never dealt with the trauma they had. And so they passed on a lot of that to them. And it's either the trauma or the byproducts of the trauma. So the byproducts of the trauma could be drinking too much, right? So they're drinking, and so it's the ancillary effects of them drinking too much around you, right? So they're more likely to say horrible things to you. They're more likely to get drunk behind a car, maybe cause an accident. They're more likely to do just things that are not good for a young child to see. And so they give you this kind of inheritance of their trauma. And if they don't deal with the crap that they were dealt with, they're going to push this onto you. Not just the aforementioned, but also phobias, right? OCD, anxiety, depression, all these things that they're dealing with, they're going to push it onto you. We've talked about kids. You see at Golden Corral buffets, right? They have really fat parents, and now they're already fat. Why? Because they modeled, the parents modeled that kind of behavior, and so they pushed it on the kids, eat, 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 where the kids themselves are soothing the pain, because the parents pushed all this crap on them. So then you look at your parents, they're inheriting the trauma, they're not dealing with it. And so when you come around, like with my father, his mother, my grandmother, left him and my young uncles on his 3rd birthday. So on his 3rd birthday, my grandmother just walked out on my grandfather and my dad's 2 younger brothers. What kind of trauma is that? On your birthday. And so he turns to drink. There's other reasons why he probably turned to drink as well. It's very common in Mexico to drink. But you get the trauma, right? And then my mother, I know reasons why she was traumatized as a young girl. And then it comes to you, right? It comes to you. And so number one is identifying this trauma. How do you do that? Well, obviously if you see your mom or dad drinking, doing drugs, or whatever, you know that's a trauma. But why are they doing it? So talk to them if you have a good relationship, and then kind of figure it out. If you don't have that kind of relationship to talk to them about it, then deal with the trauma that you inherited from them. And at the least be like, you know what? I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to smoke. Like, I don't drink. I've never been drunk. That's not to say I've never had wine or alcohol. I drink maybe a glass, 2 glasses of something a month at the most. At the most. And part of that is because of my father. So at the most shallow level, just be like, yeah, I ain't going to touch the stuff that my parents were touching. But you got to go on the deeper level. You got to go to the intergenerational trauma. Then you got to look at the trauma that you've inherited. So whether it be as a kid you were abused, negligence, whatever that is, maybe you were made fun of for having a lisp, or you were a little chubby or a little short, and then the kids started bullying you for that, and then you turned to food or drink to numb that pain. You know, whatever it is, you got to deal with it, because you're not going to keep your weight down if you don't deal with the intergenerational trauma and or the trauma you did. Yo-yo diet, you're not going to keep it down. You just won't. So we got to do the deep work, guys, and I know it can be very difficult, but it's so important that you do the deep work, whether that be through therapy, and again, pick the right therapist, whether it be talking to your parents, getting to the core of the trauma, but you got to do it if you want to have long-term permanent weight loss success. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. What was your trauma? Until next time, take care. God bless.